We are going now to the next session, and I would like to welcome the moderator of the next session, Sarah Strand, from the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, which she is leading currently. Sarah, it's your duty and mine.
Thanks, nice to see you all. So our next session, we're going to be talking about the experience of Access. We've heard a lot now, some overview of the different programs, but now through 3 presentations and then a panel, we will hear experiences about Access and also start to talk about what are some of the barriers, how can we improve. So first I will go into introducing our 3 speakers, and I will just do the same as Nicole has done, call them up. And she is actually our first speaker. We have already heard from her, but I will welcome her back to the stage for her talk about ARICE.
So I promise this is my last appearance on stage for today. So I will give you a bit overview about ARICE, what we have done in terms of figures and facts, and I will focus only on the transnational access and ships and platforms of opportunity program, and will not speak about the development of technology or our very successful training program thanks to APECS. So you saw this slide already. It's my favorite slide. I like it so much with the nice vessels here. And these are the 6 research vessels we have offered within ARICE. These are not 90 research stations, but our ships are a bit more expensive than the research stations. We have got proposals for all of, not all of these ships. We had one industry-driven owned icebreaker, the MSV Fennica, in the program run by Aqua from Finland, and unfortunately we could not implement a cruise on this vessel simply due to logistical reasons. So when we started with ARICE, the first thing we had to do was to develop an evaluation process for the ship time proposals. I can tell you, as a long-term member of Eurofleets, which is a sister project of ARICE, it took us 2 years to agree in the beginning of Eurofleets on a European-wide ship time proposal system and on the evaluation of it, because every single country does it differently and was not that easy. We adapted this system for ARICE and asked our international colleagues from Canada and the United States if they could accept it, and after a very short discussion, we accepted this evaluation process. And I will not go into detail. The only thing I want to say is we aimed at 3 reviews per proposal. We were not always successful to get 3, but all proposals have been reviewed by 2 independent evaluators. And our scientific liaison panel, which you see here, all the faces, and some of them are here, including the chair, Michele Rebesco, took care of 1, 2, or 3 proposals and followed it, have chosen the evaluators, so that we are really sure that the evaluation was carefully done and nothing happens, nothing strange happens. Then we recommended the proposals, ranked them A, B, C, and the A proposals were recommended for implementation, but the key issue was the logistic evaluation. So, in fact, not all the A-ranked proposals could be implemented because they were simply not feasible to be performed on the research vessel in the time we had available. I will take this opportunity also to thank our scientific liaison panel really, really very much. These people who you see the faces here on the screen have done an excellent job, fully free. They spent a lot of time investing into evaluating proposals, which I have to say was really excellent. So thank you to all of them from my side here at the moment. This is an overview about the projects which we have funded in ARICE. You see, we have funded 8 proposals. I will go into detail a little bit more. Of course, we were also suffering a lot from COVID, from the pandemic. So we had a gap in between of nearly 2 years. Okay, Mosaic took place during the pandemic, but all our other cruises were postponed. And of course, that was not the only problem. Also, the national polar programs had issues with COVID, and we were struggling a bit with implementing some of the cruises because the national polar program simply had to also perform all their postponed expeditions very soon after we could do it again. These are the areas where our proposals and our scientists have worked. So we had a cruise on Mosaic, the Dear Eyes cruise run by a Swiss PI, Martin Schnebeli, who was also here. I saw him. Hi, Martin. And this was a year-long expedition, and you see some slides later on about this. And we had 2 cruises on Notak. One was remote during the pandemic, and one was taking place in person last year. And we had 3 projects implemented on Odin, 1 project, Picabo, on the CSGS Amundsen in the Beaufort Sea. This I would like to mention especially because it is related to the Nunatak project, so they had the chance to prolong their terrestrial work into the marine realm, which I think is very good that we also support our EU-funded projects. And then we had a project in the eastern Beaufort Sea at the Alaskan continental margin, the Go West project with the Sikuliak, a very successful cruise. You will hear from Hauke later on more. And in total, we funded 53 days of access, but we performed 395 days of access to the Arctic Ocean. It's certainly a lot due to the 200 days we had signed 210 days we had scientists on board of Mosaic, but nevertheless, it was a good outcome for the European Commission, because the reason is why we have so many days is that we cannot perform a 7-day cruise in the Arctic, so the people were forced to stay on board until the cruise ends. But this was also good because they got more data, more international cooperation, more training, and could also look a bit more out of the box what the other people were doing. And as I heard already, yesterday, several cooperation have been initiated during these cruises, which will follow up. A little bit statistics. So we had as PIs from 6 different countries. 3 from Germany, 1 from Denmark, 1 from Italy, 1 from the Netherlands, 1 from Switzerland, and 1 from the United Kingdom. I have to stress that the countries Switzerland and Netherlands do not operate own infrastructures in the Arctic, so that was one of our goals, to give access to countries with no access to polar research vessels. And when you look at the wider parties, so the scientists involved in the project, 47 scientists from 15 countries have been involved, all over Europe, including also scientists from, for example, China and the United States had a big stake in our cruises. Another objective of ARICE was to promote female scientists on board and also early career scientists. You see here our PIs. We are not finally there to have a 50-50% distribution, but I think we are on a good way. We had 25 female scientists working and 38 male, and we had about 30 early career scientists involved in the project and 37 senior scientists. But what I'm really proud of, and which you will see here, we had 3 early career PIs leading project on the Odin cruise. The 3 projects listed here from Geomar, 2 early career scientists, and 1 from the United Kingdom. Within ARICE, we aimed also to contribute not only to EU projects, but also to large-scale initiatives. I think that's extremely important. We had 56 days with ARICE scientists in the Synoptic Arctic Survey. Veronica already mentioned this. This is a 3 years program where 12 icebreakers are measuring the full status of the Arctic Ocean, so from oceanography, pollution, up to biodiversity, and they are working, if possible, in parallel. And we had these 3 projects performing and contributing to the Synoptic Arctic Survey on board of the Swedish icebreaker Odin. And then, of course, we had this long, long project on Mosaic. I hope it was a good experience. The drifting expedition of Polarstern in the Arctic Ocean. We had first 5 persons on board for 4 Mosaic legs, and contributed, of course, to the results of this expedition. So in summary, what we established in ARICE in terms of transnational access, we developed a single entry portal for proposals and a joint external evaluation. We strongly promoted multinational collaboration. You could only access one of our vessels if you have at least 3 partners from different countries. It was an eligibility criteria. We performed 8 research cruises with 15 countries involved, gave access to 66 researchers, had 359 days at sea, and contributed to large-scale initiatives. Then I would like to speak a little bit about our Ships and Platforms of Opportunity program. So we went into cooperation with a French company, Ponant, who has built a modern state-of-the-art icebreaker, the Le Commandant Charcot, which is a PC-class vessel, and it is equipped with scientific laboratories and facilities, and it can take up to 4 scientists to participate regularly in their regular cruises. And Ponant approached ARICE because they want to make sure that the scientific projects on board are really scientifically excellent and that they don't take anybody with them, but really projects which also give data which we can use for our models. And ARICE performed the call, launched the calls for Ponant and also performed the evaluation. And again, thank you to our scientific liaison panel who also took care that this evaluation took place. You see here what cruises have been offered or what areas have been offered by Ponant. Of course, we have to stick to the normal tourist cruises. So we had cruises between Iceland and Greenland, all around Svalbard, and to the North Pole. And in the first round of proposals, we put forward 10 proposals. You see here where the PIs are coming from, so from the United States, from Canada, Germany, Italy, Norway, and France. And all these 10 proposals have been implemented. So we had a first joint call for proposals already last year with 10 proposals implemented, including installation of a permanent scientific equipment, which is continuously measuring atmospheric parameters and also sea ice thickness. And now we have already finalized the second call for proposals and just recommended 15 projects for implementation. And we are currently launching the first call for Antarctic access. You see here some pictures. I have to say the scientists are not obliged to work with the tourists, so they are fully independent on board. They work a lot on the ice, but you see also a glimpse of the laboratories here. Of course, if the scientists allow tourists, and you see this here at the sea ice work, they are welcome to observe, but it is not mandatory. And about our Ships and Platforms of Opportunity program, so up to now we launched 2 calls for proposal, which were externally evaluated by experts. We had 10 research cruises and gave access to 38 researchers in person for 127 days at sea. And I would like to highlight our consortium. You see it here. And since ARICE is ending now at the end of the project, I would like to really thank the consortium for the wonderful work we had together in the last 5 years. We've been prolonged by 1 year thanks to COVID. It was really, really wonderful working with you. And I also have to say we are continuing somehow. So we are just making an agreement how we can give access to the to our vessels in the future. And my special thank has to go to Veronika, who has run the project perfectly over the years. And while I'm speaking now, I also have to give a special thank to Francie, who organized this conference here. Both are in the ARICE team. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for that. Now we've heard some really nice details about what has been happening on the marine side of things. And now we will switch to terrestrial. So I will welcome Hannele Savela, who is the Transnational Access Coordinator with Interact, based at the University of Oulu in Finland. So please tell us more about Interact.
So was it the right-hand side button? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and tell you about access to terrestrial Arctic and about Interact transnational access. So in Interact, we have now 11 years of experience on access provision. We started in 2011 with Interact 1 funding, and now we are in Interact 3. And we have our final year next year, 2023. And during these 11 years, we have expanded the access provision from 1 to 3 access modalities. So we started with physical transnational access, and now we are also, in addition to the physical access to the stations, providing remote access where the station is collecting the samples or doing the monitoring for the scientists, to also virtual access. That means free and open access to data. During the past 11 years, we have expanded access provision from 20 stations to 52 stations. And now during these events earlier this year, we are offering access to 39 stations. Just to illustrate you with the volumes that we are working with the Interact transnational access, during the 11 years, there has been 948 user groups that have applied for 44,500 person days of access. We have a call open every year, and so the whole cycle of the transnational access and remote access, they follow the same routine, takes approximately 1 year. And we have so far supported 528 user groups and 15,500 person days of access since 2011. And that counts up to, I just took a brief look on our project management system, like 1,100 persons. In Interact 3, the current status of access provision and use so far. Here is a summary of that. So in Interact 3, we offer 6,500 person days of access, currently to 39 stations. We have arranged 3 access calls, and the fourth, the final one of the ongoing funding period, is now ongoing. The deadline is in mid-November. We have altogether granted 3,145 days of access to 99 user groups. And we have had 156 users at 35 stations so far. 78 projects have been conducted with the support of transnational access. 11 projects have been postponed due to COVID to 2023 now. And 10 projects had to be cancelled because of the war in Ukraine and the removal of the Russian stations from the access program. And now I would like to speak to you about the challenges and opportunities we have faced in Interact regarding transnational and remote access provision, because as we all know, the past 2 years have not been easy. I'm really proud what we have done despite of the challenges, but also it has taken quite a lot of effort and rearrangement and innovation also to pull everything through. And I really want to acknowledge the stations, the operators of the Interact stations and the scientists for making this happen. So the first challenge really has been the expansion of access provision, because we started with 20 stations and now at maximum level we offered access to 52. So that put a lot of pressure to our system, how we are coordinating and managing the transnational access provision across the stations. We have been needing to create a streamlined system, a coordinated system, so that we keep up of the access provided and the access used, and that we are able to draw reports and statistics, for example, for the use of European Commission. The second challenge during the recent 2 years has been the pandemic. That has caused project postponements. As I told you, 11 projects have been postponed to next year because of COVID. And also in Interact 2 that ended last year, we had 36 projects that had to be cancelled because they couldn't be done, unfortunately. And then this spring, when the war broke out, we had to cancel the projects that had been granted to Russian stations. There were 10 of those projects that had been granted in 20 and 21. And furthermore, we had already recommended access to, I think it was 18 projects that were at that stage when the war broke out in this feasibility assessment by the station managers for the final access decision. So those had to be cancelled as well and withdrawn from the process. Then, of course, with the challenges, there has also been opportunities arising, and we try to do our best to seize these opportunities to develop the access provision. So we have developed and we are implementing Inter-Access system. That is a system that covers the whole chain of access provision, and from the application, the opening the calls, preparing the calls, the application submission, the evaluation, project reporting, and then drawing the statistics for our periodic reporting to the European Commission. And we are really happy with the system, and that is the cornerstone how we are able to manage these high volumes of transnational access. Along with the development of the project management practices, we have developed a quality assurance program that covers both physical, remote, and virtual access provision. It has certain key performance indicators that we are following at every quarter to monitor that the quality of the access provision is on good level. And then, of course, the COVID with the project postponements and even cancellations forced us to be more flexible in utilization of remote access provision, because many of the stations were nevertheless more or less open during the pandemic time. So the station staff could be doing the studies for the scientists when traveling was not possible. So we were able to shift some physical transnational access projects to remote access projects. We have also developed Interact data portal for virtual access provision. And when the COVID pandemic broke out, we made a decision with the station managers and data managers of Interact that we are going to push the development of this Interact data portal so that when the scientists don't have access to the field, then we can at least provide them data from the stations. And we did that, and we launched the Interact data portal in March 2021, I think 7 months in advance. And overall, I think all these challenges have led to the increased flexibility in access provision. Of course, it's very important the results, what have been done with support from transnational access, so that we can demonstrate results from the support provided to the researchers. And of course, it's also important to convey the message, to reach out what has been done to the general public, also to the scientific community and to the infrastructures. So Since 2011, there has been hundreds of publications derived from transnational access research, and more than 200 of those have been published in high-ranking scientific journals. And just to illustrate one of the very nice articles over there, on the slide you can see a publication from 2019 from Interact 2. That was a Belgian research group. And they were supported for transnational access to Tuulik research station in Alaska. They were studying the heat stress of Arctic bumblebee species during the global warming. And when they visited the station, they found out also a completely new Arctic bumblebee species, and they named it Bombus interacti. So we now have our own bumblebee species as well. We have offered a mass online course called The Changing Arctic. I think nowadays 6,500 people have done the course. It's provided in Coursera platform. We are arranging several times a year TA community meetings to the researchers we have supported and those who might be interested in applying transnational access, both online and face-to-face. We have transnational access ambassadors. We have an expert pool that is helping if we have some applications for transnational access with very specific research expertise, so we can invite an external expert from this pool to help with the evaluation of such applications. And then, of course, we are utilizing social media in the outreach. Then about the user feedback. So we are collecting feedback from all of our transnational and remote access user groups. And the overall satisfaction with the transnational access has been very good, very high. And the researchers are really highly valuing this transnational access instrument provided by the European Commission. 90% of our users in Interact 3, for example, think that the overall experience about transnational access is excellent or good, and 100% of our TA users would recommend Interact transnational access to their colleagues. A couple words about the virtual access. So we are providing that through Interact data portal. We currently have 1,700 data sets from the Interact stations. I think 14 stations at the moment are providing data, or actually metadata. This is a metadata portal with endpoints to real data that is hosted by the stations or the virtual access providers themselves. We have had about 4,500 VA users from 136 countries this year, and we are now at this very moment having a virtual access promotion campaign to expand the user base of virtual access even further. One slide about the future of transnational access, how we envision the future to be. We see even increasingly flexible provision and use of different access modalities in the future. And of course, we see it very important to continue the provision of high-quality access services to high-quality research stations for really high-ranking research groups. We are supporting currently about 50% of the transnational access applications. And they undergo a rigorous scientific evaluation to ensure the quality of science. We foresee continued development and expansion of remote access provision, for example, through remote instrumentation and provision of remote services. Continued development and expansion of virtual access provision through the data portal. And we wish to feed increasingly into the regional, polar and global observing efforts. There are many of those going on at the moment, and I think there are over 50 networks where the Interact stations are currently supporting already. And if I remember correctly, from the Station Managers Forum, and we are looking forward to do even more. Thank you.
So now we've heard from the marine side and the terrestrial side, and now we'll hear a bit about optimizing and integrating different types of infrastructure. So I welcome up Arild Sundfjord from the Norwegian Polar Institute. He's a work package leader in both Arctic Passion and the Nansen Legacy project.
Great, thanks very much. It feels a bit like a ping pong match here between terrestrial and marine, because I will go into the marine domain again, but it's not a competition. Especially not since we would lose that competition on the marine side, looking at all the examples from the terrestrial side. So, yes, the Arctic Passion project is now past the first full year with a complete field season. So I will talk a bit about experiences from that year, using the Norwegian Polar Institute's Arctic Ocean Cruise in 2022 as an example. Yeah, let's move on and see. Yeah, first, just a few words about the Arctic Passion project. Some of you are hopefully familiar with it. It's led by the Alfred Wegener Institute. Michael Kercher is leading the project. If you want to find more information about it, just visit arcticpassion.eu and learn more about it. The overall main point is that we strive towards the co-creation and implementation of a coherent and integrated Arctic observing system, building on the existing observational systems that we already have and integrating them better across disciplines and across methods. In this presentation, I will focus only on the marine in situ component in the deep Arctic Ocean, so the sea ice cover and the water masses below the surface. Now that the ice cover is retreating and we have a few more icebreakers available, not enough, but more than before, it's easier to be ambitious about what we can do in terms of continuous observations and long-term observations inside the deep Arctic Ocean. So I would argue that this combination of different infrastructures from the ships that we obviously need to get in there, but also with permanent installations in terms of moorings, which I will explain a bit more about later, and drifting observatories. We now have a chance to systematically cover larger areas and longer time periods inside the Arctic Ocean proper. Let's see if this will move. Yes, thanks. So my first case that I try to make as often as possible is that we still need proper research icebreakers and research vessels in general, because there is lots of information coming in from remote sensing. There is a drive towards autonomous platforms, which is great, but these are, for us, working in the ocean, complementary to, but not replacing the research vessels. Chemical fluxes across these interfaces in snow and sea ice, the marine species, how many are they, which ones actually live in this area? There is no way you can cover that with remote sensing or autonomous platforms. So when we go to sea, we need to make sure that we have the right expertise. This requires careful planning and open doors. We need to allow people to come on board on our ships, following sort of the example of ARICE, but less rigorous, I would say, for this year's Arctic Passion Arctic Ocean Cruise. About 1/3 of the participants on the cruise were from outside the Norwegian Polar Institute. That includes partners from Norway, from the EU countries, from North America, and from India. And I think that is a model we will want to stick with, because complementary expertise is what we need. So in addition to the detailed measurements you can make from the ship, you need time series that go across winter, all seasons that we don't have ships in the area. So this is an example of one of the moorings that we deployed in the Arctic Ocean this summer. Some of the instruments are shown on the figure on the right-hand side here, but there's actually a few more on there. And the point I want to make is that the mooring itself is an infrastructure that is quite costly and demanding to deploy and retrieve. We offer space on that mooring, so in total we have instrumentation from 5 different institutions, something that neither Arctic Passion or the Norwegian Polar Institute alone could do. But together, inviting friends and partners, we now have a much better coverage of these, like biogeochemistry and biology, than we would otherwise be able to do. So the new moorings are the 2 stars in the Nansen and Amundsen basins. We plan to recover them in 2 years and hopefully gradually expand this coverage systematically. So what we need to do is, as a community, talk about where the key areas for long-term observations are, coordinate which ships service which moorings when, and again, offer space on the moorings, make sure that we have similar instrumentation when it's different institutions that are sort of the owner or the key operators of the different moorings. The third element in this is to cover space, and that you can do by drifting observatories or drifting sensor packages. So again, on this cruise, we deployed a number of drifting sea ice buoys for NPI, but also for several partners in the project. They are different in kind, or different in terms of what they measure. Some are quite simple and measure snow thickness and sea ice thickness. Some are more complex and measure chemistry or biology below the sea ice, and we want to expand this again on Arctic Passion cruises, but also, of course, in collaboration with anyone else who does cruises in here. Commandant Charcot is an example where we can use that ship as a platform to simply deploy this kind of instrument packages at the right time and place with modest cost. And again, we should work as teams here where we invite others to join so that we build more comprehensive instrument clusters instead of one institution placing something here and another something there. You try to build a stronger package with more sensors to get good coverage of the whole system in fewer locations, obviously, but you need those clusters with more complete instrumentation. I want to mention a sub-project within Arctic Passion that is really reaching out of the project, the establishment of the Atlantic Arctic Distributed Biological Observatory, we call it, but it's not only for biology, it is for climate and environment in general. So it builds on an initiative that has been established on the Pacific side nearly 20 years ago. They have managed to coordinate much better who goes where and does what when. And we build on that example and work together with them, and also along with a similar initiative between Greenland and Canada. The idea again is to agree on which areas are the most important one to focus on. What are the core variables that we need to cover together? And there is no funding except to meet. So the idea is to create this win-win situations where you offer space on your ship or on your mooring to others, and together you build more data and more useful data sets also for yourself. So please visit the Arctic Passion website also for more information about that one, or even join us in Bergen for the first fall meeting for the Atlantic Arctic DBO on Monday and Tuesday next week. Finally, I want to look ahead a little bit more. There is a new project funded that starts in January, the High Arctic Ocean Observing System led by the Nansen Center. This will give us new opportunities for, among other things, underwater navigation in the Arctic Ocean, providing transponders, so acoustic transmitters on moorings in the ocean that Argo drifters or autonomous gliders can find their position from. And this will allow us to add a fourth element to those three that I already mentioned, enabling us to cover much better both time and space. So this is something we obviously need to coordinate well with the logistics and infrastructure in Arctic Passion and elsewhere, and something that we really look forward to starting on in January. And I think that's what I had. Now I made up for some of the time that we're behind. Thank you.
Now we will dive into our panel discussion. So those that are panelists, I welcome you down, and I can introduce you as you take your seats here. I assume this is where you should be. So I will just begin to introduce in no particular order, but maybe you all can give a little wave. Yeah, I think that makes sense, I guess. So with us today, we have Torben Christensen from Aarhus University. He's the manager of Zackenberg Research Station and is also scientific leader of GEM, the Greenland Ecosystem Monitoring Project, also involved with AMAP and CAF. We also have Hauke Flores from AVI, senior scientist coordinating fauna sampling and mosaic, and is currently working on European fish inventory of the Central Arctic Ocean. We have Rafael Gonçalves-Araujo. I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce that quite right, but he's an early career researcher from DTU, working in DTU Aqua, and he was a PI of an ARICE-funded project. We also have Lisa Bröder from the ETH Zurich. She a bit combines the marine and the terrestrial sites, working with the Arctic carbon cycle. And lastly, we have Danièle Rod from the Swiss Polar Institute, and she has been executive director of the Swiss Polar Institute since 2017 and has worked extensively in international science collaboration and actually used to be based here in Brussels. So, thank you all for joining us. I have some questions that are specifically directed to each of you, but of course we can also, everyone can address anything they think is interesting, and I will try to make sure there's time for audience questions as well, but we are running rather behind schedule. But just to jump right in and to get everyone to share their experiences using these Arctic infrastructure systems. First, I have a question directed at Hauke about your experience with going on a cruise on the US icebreaker, RV Sikuliaq. And just to speak about your experience, both accessing that infrastructure and were there barriers you encountered and how that was, being a European using the American research vessel.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, you can hear me. Great. Yes, I've been sailing on ARICE Sikuliaq in November 2019 in the Arctic autumn, and we were going there to sample a fish in the Arctic Ocean, the polar cod, which is at the center of the Arctic food web. It's the indirect food of all the polar bears and the direct food of all the seals and the birds in the Arctic. And this cruise was, from my experience, a very positive experience. We had got access to the ship through ARICE, and I must say the process was extremely transparent, and there were really no barriers. The information of how to apply was there. We scientists, we actually talked to each other before and say, well, let's do this. And once we decided we want to do this, it was a straightforward process. So I really can't say in this aspect, I cannot speak about barriers because it went fairly smooth from the application through the evaluation, and then the implementation with the US logistics at NOAA was extremely forthcoming. We met an administration that was at first a bit struggling because there's an interface problem between the funds that we acquired in Europe and the transfer to those funds to the US. That's maybe one obstacle that is for our scientists behind the scene, but that was definitely there. But apart from that, we were welcomed on the ship as one of the two parties that were able to work on the ship. It's a mid-size Arctic icebreaker. And we had a fantastic cruise. We were having a very personal atmosphere, and we got everything done that we wanted to do. I have to say that we use a particularly demanding device to sample fish under sea ice, and the crew took it as a positive challenge, and it worked perfectly. So we had a successful cruise. But I want to say one thing. I think this micro is, I think I need to get closer, right? Yeah. Okay. What was really an asset of this cruise that we were able to bring in a lot of early career researchers on this ARICE project. We have one PhD thesis that took about 50% of their data from this cruise, and a master's thesis as well. And I think this is unique in the sense that that there was a very direct line from making this cruise possible and involving early career researchers, bringing them right into the field that's not always possible in the bigger scientific structures that we have.
Yeah, thanks. And that's actually a very perfect segue to the next question, which is directed at Rafael and your experiences as an early career researcher, and how does it change and benefit your career being able to have access to this infrastructure?
Yes, I want to bring like this early career perspective here today. So for me, it was quite, let's say, life-changing getting this grant. First and foremost because it was when I crossed the border, let's say, to the other side. It was my first grant as PI, and for me it was very important and also interesting to change the sides and then for the first time be responsible for managing and leading the project, gathering a consortium with international institutions. So it was very frightening at the beginning, but then everything went smooth, and and also the whole experience for me can be like brought into two words that were basically learning and growth. So I learned a lot during this project, and there's a lot that I learned I will take with me through my career. And there was also a lot of growth because it was my first time, as I mentioned, managing such a big project, but also leading a group into a cruise. We were able to bring 9 scientists in our group to the cruise last year. Unfortunately, in the first year, we had to do a remote participation because of COVID, but still everything went smooth, and we could get most of the data we were supposed to. So there was like this career growth, and also as I am early career myself, I was focusing on trying to bring more early careers. So out of 9 people we were last year in the cruise, 6 of us were early career. And also I was trying to manage and try to get the 50-50% between male and female. And we were getting almost there as well. So in that sense, it was quite interesting for me that not only I could benefit myself from my career, but also try to bring along some other early careers and also make them benefit. And another point that I found very interesting as an early career getting this grant is that I think I was like not only the only one, but the few of us, we were able to show like for other early careers that we can get through this, and we have great ideas, so we should be less self-conscious, and if we have an idea, we have just to follow them. And so for me it was like quite interesting. And career-wise, I'm now moving as well, so next week I'm starting a tenure track position. And through the evaluation for this position, getting this grant was quite important, and a good remark from the evaluation committee. So I think, and I strongly suggest everyone to go after their dreams and try it, because it's worth it.
Yeah, thanks for that, and congratulations on the developments. I think that's exactly what we want to hear, which is that these experiences are so important for early career researchers and can often really be a turning point that provides a totally new open door or completely solidifies someone's decision to continue in Arctic research. The next question is directed at Lisa, as having experienced both the terrestrial and the marine side, having experience with both ARACT and ARICE. and what were the differences in using these programs, and if you can speak to the experience with both, and also if you think there are ways to better integrate and collaborate the different programs.
Yeah, thank you very much. And well, thanks a lot to both Interact and ARICE, because I've benefited a lot from both programs, which is great. Well, in terms of difference, for me, it was really a big difference in scale of the project. Similar to Rafa, the Interact project was actually my first grant as a PI that I got a couple of years ago. And that was basically me and my French postdoc colleague coming to Zackenberg Research Station, where Torben is the manager of, and hiking around for 3 weeks collecting water samples, whereas our Pickable project on the icebreaker Amundsen involved, well, we had 9 berths in total, and I think it was 5 different European countries that sent participants, plus the Canadian collaborators. So it was a much bigger operation and a lot more coordination between the partners, a lot more logistical challenges in a sense that, well, yeah, we were supposed to go in 2020. Of course, that was impossible with international travel. So there was a lot more reshuffling. But interestingly, I think there's also a lot of similarities between the two opportunities, because on both sides you have a great team that supports you at the place. Like, I mean, you can look at Hauke Flores for Amundsen Science here, and also at the team in Zackenberg. It's great once you get there. Everybody has this can-do attitude, and it's really, yeah, it's an inspiring place to work, both on the ship and on the station. And especially a remote station like the one in Zackenberg, it feels a little bit like being on a ship, because you're cut off from the rest of the world. When we were there was no internet access, only via sat phone. And yeah, similar to being on an icebreaker in that regard as well. Now I'm trying to remember the other question. You had a bunch of questions that you asked. How to better integrate the two different programs? Yeah, that's a challenging one. I think, especially for me, working along like this source to sink concept from land to the ocean, it's great to have both of the networks. And I mean, a lot of the stations are not that far from the coast, so maybe there could be a little bit more interaction. But with the big icebreakers, it's kind of hard to get into the shallow zone of the Arctic shelf. So I guess it's not that easy to really link those two programs closely together.
It's more of a thought-provoking question.
Yeah. I think, I mean, in terms of science, obviously there are projects and programs, and I mean, Nunatariok has been mentioned before, is one that's really focusing on the Arctic coasts, and there it's great to have both opportunities of like marine expeditions and land-based work. So it's great that both of them exist, but I find it tricky to really link them strongly.
Yeah, it makes sense, as you say. I mean, they are quite different basis of the infrastructure itself. So next, I have a question directed at Torben as a station manager. And it would be great if you could speak on how it's been as managing the station, being involved in the ACCESS program, and both the benefits and maybe challenges of that, as well as how it's impacted your operations, perhaps in terms of collaboration.
Right. Okay, thank you. Before I take on the Zackenberg hat, I think I just want to say, as I guess having been the user of different types of research support from the EU over the past 30 years or so, I think the tool of the transnational access is actually one of the most, the best ones, one of those that actually gets closest to provide bang for the buck very quickly, because you provide access to engaged people that will take advantage, as we've just heard several examples of it. So it is a fantastic tool, just like also, I guess, we mentioned the research training networks. But as a research station manager, I also think that it, of course, it has been fantastic for Zackenberg. We are, as you say, we are more or less on a ship or a land-based ship. We are remote. We are in a part of the Arctic that is difficult to get to. So I guess maybe even also at the times now where part of the Arctic is completely closed for us. What we're doing with this is really providing access to a place that's very difficult to get to. Logistically, there are national park regulations, there are all sorts of things that you have to, if you like, pass an authorization to be able to get to an insight and do your work. And we can provide that access, and we can do that in a systematic and sort of organized manner. And we have done that now since the beginning of the transnational access in Interact. And I think that the international input that we have seen at the station as a consequence of that, has been absolutely pivotal also for the profile that, of course, we are proud to have internationally as a, if you like, sort of a high Arctic station, which is relatively well studied. We have a long also monitoring program with a long-standing monitoring program over 25 years where we have lots of data that we would like to see used. And the best examples actually of where everything comes up in and becomes fantastic to watch from a station manager point of view is when people like Lisa comes to our station and she really utilizes our database of 25 years of monitoring, and she provides her input and her research ideas, and she works on the basis of that. And it's a relatively small cost, but in this context, I think we are seeing some fantastic benefit from the Transnational Access Program.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear about this ability to use kind of the wealth of data from the past years and then people coming and building on that each time. And to build on this idea of what the scientific community is gaining, the next question is directed at Danièle. And specifically, what is the scientific community gaining from transnational access, specifically coming from non-polar geographic countries like Switzerland?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I mean, Switzerland is not an Arctic country, but when it comes to science, just us as the Swiss Polar Institute over the last 5 years, we've funded over 48 projects in the Arctic. So there is a density and a quality of science in many non-Arctic countries, and I think this is also something to be taken into account. So such countries have, of course, a deficit in access, but this can also be, I think, turned into an advantage, or at least a strength, in the sense that scientists have to compete for access. It means that it also enhances the quality of the science that they have to propose. They have to collaborate, which also forces networks. And one thing that maybe we have not discussed is we need networks. The scientists need networks in order to access the information and the stations or infrastructure that they need for their science. But they also come back with networks. I mean, these are places where you can just not shut yourself off from other people. And so even if you go with one project, you come back with a network that lead to other projects. And this is really a richness that we should not underestimate. And maybe non-Arctic countries also need to be more creative, also in using public-private partnerships and infrastructure sharing, as was mentioned before with a Dutch example in the Antarctic. So I think there is elements of positiveness, but there is, of course, this dependency, and science in these regions is of such high emergency at the moment that it should not be constrained by access. That would be the wrong barrier to have. So large programs which have high visibility, like those that were just mentioned, ARICE and Interact, have a really important role, I think, because they can actually bring together a critical mass of scientists over a long time. funders such as the Swiss Polar Institute in many countries have a portfolio of bilateral collaborations, of ways of giving access to their scientists in many different infrastructures, but there are only few which have this critical mass and this visibility, and I think they're very important.
Thank you. Now we're running out of time, but I think I will pose one question to everyone, which is perhaps the most pressing question, which is what types of infrastructure or types of access do you feel are missing? And yeah, I think just take it as you like, the order.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with this meeting, because I think that I didn't really get to talk about the challenges in administrating this TA at one terrestrial station, because I think one of the challenges has been this rather rigid scientific borders that have been drawn up, that we've been trying to promote the type of work that you're doing, that crosses between the terrestrial and coastal systems. But at least there has been cases where this has been difficult to get through because it falls between chairs. It falls between the one and the other territory, if you like, when it comes to these programs. And having sort of a true interdisciplinary approach and crossing also between different components of the ecosystems in the Arctic, I think would be a good thing and a good development.
Yeah, I guess I can just second that.
Go ahead if you. Well, I guess one could always ask for more. I personally would always vote to have more icebreakers, but honestly, we have a lot of excellent infrastructure in the polar regions, and we have some very strong countries and supranational unities, such as the European Union, that are very strong in bringing out infrastructure. And I think at this moment we are in the step where we have already started, but I think we can do a better job at integrating what we have. And I think ARICE and Interact are a good example. But when we see, for instance, what kind of mooring programs are in place at the moment that we scientists constantly are reminding each other of, but we don't have really a complete overview of what is going on. Another issue is data standards. Make sure that when one nation puts funds into setting up a distributed observatory or a group of nations or a scientific network, that the data that comes out from that will be immediately accessible also for other similar initiatives, particularly in the Arctic Ocean. I think we can learn a lot by just bringing together what we already have. And I've heard about this, I've seen this nice initiative of the Atlantic-Arctic DBO. I've heard talking about this before, and I think it's a great initiative, but we should immediately also think about an Atlantic and Arctic DBO. And when we think about these things, then we must, once we establish such observatories or such initiatives, it always must be with the idea in mind how we can link this to the global scientific infrastructure and involve more international scientists. I want to say one more thing. It will be really brief, but it came to my mind when I thought about our ARICE cruise. ARICE was also very good by involving people at low threshold who are not yet, or by nature, maybe because they are from non-polar countries or from the global south. Because it was low threshold and you did not really need to have your network in place already. Because now I'm a senior scientist, I have a network, I can get on many research ships if I ask my colleagues and we forge it a little bit. But since the polar regions are a matter of global concern, one effort that we could make is to involve more scientists from the global south into our programs and give them access to these regions and work with the networks, the scientific networks that are already in place. I think we can all benefit from that.
Thanks. Now it's about time for the coffee break, but since this is a panel discussion, I don't want to take away the opportunity for the audience to ask questions, I think it's important to give you the chance. So I would like to open up the floor. If does anyone have a question for our nice panelists? Yeah, go ahead with your red button.
Hi, thank you all for a very interesting discussion. I'm Sune Tam with Arctic Trucks Polar, and we're an Iceland-based company that provides a science platform and logistical platform for overland conveyance on the ice sheet, which is often one of the most expensive places to get to. As we're not attached to a specific national government, it's hard to reach an audience. Part of the reason I came today was to understand the landscape of how this is working, and hearing ARICE and Interact both having calls for proposals. Is that something where the funding comes to those bodies to distribute through those calls, or is that independently funded through national parties or institutions?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, here Veronica Wilmot, project manager of ARICE. This is European funding. So we from ARICE and Interact have applied for calls opened by the European Commission with EU funds. And yeah, we secured the budget. We have our partners, which are the operators of vessels and other institutions operating in polar regions. And that's how this transfer is going. So we secure the ship time in advance, and then we open calls for proposals to bring those scientists, bring scientists on board, or in the stations, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I think perhaps I should release everyone to the coffee break if we're going to stick on schedule. Is that there's nothing else that needs to be said before I can send people out, I think. But thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, we can discuss more in the coffee break if you have anything unanswered.